second question. Our immigration program admits applicants from many categories. Here are just a few. Wealthy people who agree to invest in new businesses. Employees ranging from physicians and professors to unskilled workers. Family members of previous immigrants. Winners of an immigration lottery that promotes diversity. And refugees in fear for their lives. And the question is, who should be let into the United States and why? And Chris is up first.
Employees ranging from physicians and professionals and unskilled workers. It wasn't that long ago in the big picture that before you could come to this country, you had to tell us what you could offer us. Some people were making violins, others were doctors and physicians, some were engineers. Okay, when did we get away from that? We got away from that under Democratic leadership, and it was a free ride. To give you an idea, right now a Syrian refugee can come to this country and start off making about $2,400 a month, while a veteran who served in several wars, suffering from PTSD, missing limbs, things with like Agent Orange, is making about $1,250 a month. Who did the math there, okay? We have to start taking care of our own. We have to continue to put America first. We have to get in step with the president who's seeing that we are putting America first. And I want to put the Lowcountry first. And I've got a long track record of getting things done. Some of my opponents have got started in one position and then they're running for another position. As a ladder that they're climbing. I took a different route. I went off into the country as an activist, and I was able to prove myself. I influenced the presidential election. I've expanded the Republican Party. I've introduced citizen legislation. I'm getting ready to introduce more citizen legislation to the president next month. It's going to be called the First Americans Holiday Act. I've convinced him to give the Native Americans a holiday for the first time in history because he wants traction with the Native Americans in in New Mexico and Arizona. Okay? And so that's what this bill is going to do. It's going to give them traction in those states. And it's going to bring on 4.8 million more potential voters for him. Not to mention the 1.2 million Mennonite and Amish, and then about the 6 to 8 million bikers that came out. I'm getting ready to drop 4.8 million back on them. And because that's called thinking ahead and trying to make a difference.
Problem and issue. Before I get to that real quick on that last question about deficits in the economy, one other thing real quick is we have to elect people that will say no and not vote for continuing resolutions. They talk a big game here, but they get to D.C., and they've told me this, that they can't vote that way because that just doesn't fit the mold. Again, that's not me. So anyway, immigration. This country is built on immigration. We all know that. We all learned that. I don't know if they teach that anymore, but we did. It's simple. It's simple. No matter where you've come from, no matter what your background is, if your intentions are to move to America, there needs to be a process. I'm not an immigration lawyer or an immigration expert, so that process can be better defined. I do agree with the president when he says that citizens from nations that are terrorist nations will not be allowed in the country. I agree with that. Simple. Everything that the Democratic Socialist Party is trying to push is exactly the opposite with a liberty-minded Republican. So immigration from the wall to funding the artificial intelligence that is there, we're able to do it. We're not stupid. It has to be funded and implemented, and then the labor. We need to have the proper amount of people doing this job. But with artificial intelligence, then you save lives by keeping people out of the harm and fire.
I'm going to keep the notes in hand this time just because I do want to answer what's actually asked here in detail, which is kind of complicated to remember. So who should be let into the United States and why? I'd like to start with who are we supposed to be keeping out? Why should we be keeping anybody out? And so the first thing is we have to build the wall. And the president's working very hard on that, and he's making good strides. It's very frustrating to see how hard he's had to work for the money just to do that when there's so many other things that have been passed through easily. But once you have a wall where people are actually funneling into a smaller area, and yes, there's places with rivers, and yes, there's places where you need other things besides a wall, but the fact is that if we have a border that's not so porous, then we can actually focus on letting people in where it makes sense and not people just sneaking across. Now, we have to end chain migration, which is one of the things mentioned on here, family members of previous immigrants. We have to end birthright citizenship. I do not think it makes any sense. We've got this moral hazard of women actually coming here who are pregnant, staying just long enough so their baby can be born here. Does that make any sense at all? No, of course not. It's absolutely absurd. So we have to end those two things, and then we also have to we have to also get back to things that make common sense. It is true. We don't necessarily have to take in everybody from all over the world. And I'll give you a good example on refugees. I know we feel sorry for and feel terrible and feel compassionate for people who are suffering in other countries. Why don't we take a more proactive stance? I'm sure our president would love to do that. Let's get together with those countries and work out what's wrong with those countries. Why? And you might say, oh, it's a corrupt leadership. Well, there are things that can be done. This is the president that will do that. This is the kind of president that will go out and say, okay, Nicaragua or whoever, let's see what's wrong with your country. Why is everybody running across the borders? But another thing is, I do think we should have a meritocracy, and this is something the president is already working on. We should have a meritocracy for people, and the examples here given, like physicians, et cetera. Okay. And then the last thing is that we definitely should increase our work visa program, which the president has already been working on very hard. Thank you.